Christian,
Yes,
welcome.
thank you very much.
And the reason you're here and why I'm allowed to talk to you is because you sent me a message,
That's right.
and that was because I had written on Facebook that I'm going to do a series of interviews on the theme of being nullified by the democratic state.
Mm.
And then you associated that with events you've experienced quite recently.
Yes, this past year. So I've experienced things that I think most people can't imagine happening in Sweden today,
No,
actually.
we'll get to that soon, but can you start by just telling us a little bit about who you are and what your background is and so on?
Yes, absolutely. I grew up in Bergsjön in Gothenburg for the first 9 years, then we moved out to Kungsbacka. So, yes, a very safe childhood. I'm a civil engineer. I've been involved in music and floorball and lived a pretty ordinary life. I've lived abroad a bit and seen different sides of the world, you could say. So I've gotten a lot of different impressions. I've always been very curious and tried to learn about things and understand how things work.
And I've also understood that you're an expert on the subject of ufology.
Well, not ufology exactly, but the movement around what's happening officially it's called the disclosure movement, meaning the movement that wants states to share the information they have on the subject of ufology. Then there are people who are much better at the subject of ufology itself than I am, but yes, something like that.
Interesting. But you've delved into this and gathered a lot of knowledge and contacts within the field, at least from what I understand.
Yes, I've been interested my whole life, and then it really took off about 5 or 6 years ago when I discovered two cases that are, I think, two of the best cases in world history, which I went into very deeply and familiarized myself with and became completely convinced. And then that led to me getting more and more contacts, first in Sweden at the highest level, and then those contacts led further out into the world to those who are involved with the subject. The whistleblowers and their lawyers in the US, where I am now the head for Sweden, you could say, for the Citizens for Disclosure Initiative, which is run by the New Paradigm Institute under a very famous human rights lawyer.
Hmm. And in digging into these cases and so on, that's when, around this time last year, you experienced an anxiety that you went to the health clinic and talked a bit about, or was that actually why you went to the clinic, or did you have some other reason for being there? You don't have to say exactly what it was, but was it the anxiety that brought you there?
What happened was that we had just launched Citizens for Disclosure Sweden, and I spent a few weeks trying to get a response for this in the media and politics, and got basically zero response. And it felt very unsettling to have those contacts and be involved in this subject at such a high level. And, well, be treated like a complete tinfoil hat wearing nut who's talking nonsense by people in Sweden who are supposed to hold official positions and deal with defense policy or similar things, or the media, which is supposed to scrutinize what's happening in the world. And when so much has happened on the subject in other countries, especially in the US, but also Brazil and Japan and several other countries, I went to the health clinic to describe the unsettling feeling that it was like I was living in one world and the rest of Swedish society was living in another world. And it started to take a toll on me mentally. And I wondered where you can turn in Sweden, because when it's a subject that barely exists officially, where there's just silence, and you mostly have to search for information online if you don't have any contacts, I just wondered where to turn with these ponderings and the thoughts you have on the subject. It easily becomes internet forums and so on, but this is for real for me and many others.
So, am I right in thinking that it actually caused a sort of deep and lingering dejection in you, that you had gone into this entire endeavor so very strongly, with all your heart and soul, and you perhaps genuinely thought there would be some kind of response, since there are, as you know, quite strong and compelling arguments for lifting the lid, for opening up and revealing what has been hidden? Is that correct? I mean, civil rights perspectives, but also laws and the foundation of a democratic society, we're talking about freedom of speech, and especially in Sweden, we have a strong tradition of the principle of public access to official records, that most documents are public and so on. And was it that you went in with so much energy and then realized it was like hitting your head against a brick wall? Am I right in thinking it became a bit of a depression?
Yes, something like that. Exactly. And you also have to remember that it hasn't just been, people who have been talking about this for a very long time. In the last 2 years, we've also had 12 whistleblowers who have testified under oath now in the US Congress. And when it comes to a lot of things, we in Sweden follow what happens in the US very closely. I mean, you can read about what American presidents are up to daily on the front pages of our news media. So it feels like it's very close to home, it's very relevant, what's happening in the US. But here, this is a subject that's met with complete silence. There might be a dutiful short article that's often very skeptical, but there's no debate, no discussion.
Let's go back to the meeting at the health clinic.
Hmm.
Did you speak with a doctor there?
Yes, I spoke with a doctor, and I even warned him about the conversation beforehand. And I was completely proper, calm, and composed, with no aggression or anything else involved. It was just me and him, and he looked at me with wide eyes and said at first that he didn't really believe this, and that it sounded very strange, and that he wanted a second opinion. And then after 15-20 minutes, 2 police officers rushed in and took me to the psychiatric ward, basically, without me getting any idea of what I wasn't allowed to say anything about it. It was just, this is how it is now. You're coming with us to the psych ward, so this can be properly investigated. And then it took me 26 hours and meetings with 5 doctors before I could finally get out of there, after the 5th doctor had called my fiancée, Johanna, and done some investigating and looked into it. But the first 4 doctors, it was like talking to a brick wall. No one could accept that I was involved in this and that it could be real.
But let's go back to the conversation with the doctor at the health clinic. How do you feel you behaved? Was it calm, or was there a confrontational atmosphere? Were you completely unaffected by drugs or anything else?
Yes, no, I was totally unaffected and very calm. I spoke about the way I'm speaking now and just emphasized that this was very important to me and that it affected me very strongly.
I see.
But the doctor's attitude was that I was having a psychotic episode or that I was making it up.
And after this multifaceted trauma, which one has to call it, with police storming in and you being held in care for 26 hours, what happens next after you're released?
Well, then I continue this work of contacting the media and politicians for a few months, until I've contacted basically every media outlet and a great many politicians in Sweden, and I've received a single reply from the editor-in-chief of, I think it was Nyheter. That's who I got a reply from. That's basically the only one. Otherwise, it's just silence.
Okay. So you went from this trauma of being arrested for your opinions, or simply for reflecting on things that aren't conventional.
Not arrested, but involuntarily committed.
Yes, involuntarily committed. And from there, it entered a more intense phase, you could say. You felt it was so unfair that you wanted to escalate things, so to speak. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yes, that's a correct interpretation. And then you can choose to believe this or not, but then I was psychologically tormented by the people who, in my opinion, are responsible for the cover-up that's actually happening in Sweden, in this area. And that led me to go to the police station in order to file an official report, partly because of the significant data breaches that these individuals committed when they went in. They, or perhaps their American colleagues, went in and deleted important book material that I had personally created and stored on my iCloud account. And yes, they write psychologically tormenting messages in comment sections and things like that. I know exactly who they are. I can account for it, along with some other people who have also been involved in this.
So you've written a book about this?
Yes, partly. But the book goes into some of these things.
I see. And suddenly the manuscript was gone.
Yes. And these things, when this group of people gets involved and tries to influence my life, it always happens in connection with me taking a step forward or doing something. Then it's like I get a slap on the wrist. so that I'm supposed to understand that I shouldn't be involved in this, but to stay away, you know.
Maybe we should just clarify for those who aren't so familiar with groups and forums on the internet and so on, that the atmosphere can, of course, be very heated. You can be subjected to pile-ons. There's a lot of online hate in these kinds of forums, right?
Yes, but in this case, it was about anonymous accounts that I and some acquaintances of mine have been tracking for a long time, who write about things they shouldn't know about my life and so on.
So it wasn't merely delusions, as the doctor imagined, but these were concrete, thoroughly documented experiences with clear digital traces, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, yes. Can you tell us about this action you took at SVT? You went there too to talk to... Or am I getting ahead of the story now?
A little ahead.
All right.
What happened at the police station was that I was denied the right to file my police report.
Yes, that's where we were, at the police station.
First, yes. And then a lot of things happened. I was tackled and reported for attempted violent resistance and all sorts of things. But the next day, I went to another police station, and there I was treated correctly and was allowed to file my report.
If we just go back a bit to that incident where you were tackled...
Yes.
At what stage? How long were you at the police station? Who did you talk to?
I went there with my fiancée first, and the police station was completely empty at the time.
Okay.
I briefly explained what it was about first at the reception desk. Then we sat for 40 minutes waiting while they were running around a bit, and there was some commotion, you know. So you got the feeling that they didn't really know how to handle it. Then I came into the room with the police officer, where I sat for 3 minutes and started to explain. Before he interrupted me and said that here in Kristianstad we deal with real crimes. And then I tell him that when he asks me to leave, I say, absolutely. I just want your name first, because I want to take this further. And then he refuses to give his name. He claims that he has already given me his name, which he hasn't.
Yes.
And then on the way out, when they drag me out and push me to the ground outside the police station, I repeat the question. I think it's 16, 17 times what his name is. Just because I have the right to get a justification for why he won't take the report and what his name is. I have a right to that. But I don't get it.
No.
And then it ends with them taking me to the holding cell, where I'm kept for almost an hour before I'm allowed to leave.
It's incredible, really, because you can actually go into a police station and report anything. Filing a report it's not really their job to filter things out. You should have been allowed to file the report, I think, when someone has committed a data breach.
Yes, or at least get a justification. And the name, not least, of the person who refuses to take the report. I've looked it up very carefully, and that's how it's supposed to work.
Yes. And then what happens next?
Then the next day, I call the police and ask to meet someone who will take my report. And I'm promised that it will be fine if I go to another station.
Okay.
And so I do. I go there, meet two very nice police officers who sit with me for an hour and take down a lot of the information I have. And then after that, I go to SVT, where I basically demand to talk to someone. You know, just have a coffee, talk for 15 minutes. That I've been trying to reach every single media house in all of Sweden for 3 months now.
Yes.
Without getting in touch with anyone, and I believe this is an incredibly important matter, and that I have a position that means someone should listen. This should be relevant in a Swedish context.
Maybe I should just add that by your position, you mean, in part, this chairmanship, right?
Yes, the national coordinator for Citizens for Disclosure.
And then also many international contacts.
Yes, and also in Sweden. I mean, those who I, and many with me, consider to be the most knowledgeable in Sweden. Thomas Persson and Beatrice Villaroel, for example, so...
Beatrice has been in the spotlight a lot lately and has made videos too, right? Where she talks about this with her observations and her thesis and so on, right?
Yes, and she was published in Nature last week, and her results are now double peer-reviewed, so... And they say that she's been able to trace reflective surfaces that were captured on old astronomical plates from between 49 and 58. So before we humans had satellites in orbit, there were objects that reflected light just as if they were metallic or mirrored surfaces.
Hmm.
And there's no natural phenomenon that we know of that produces such results. Instead, and those observations also coincide with nuclear weapons tests and known UFO cases.
And Beatrice is, from what I understand, one of the most prominent astronomers we have in Sweden.
Yes, she travels the world, speaks at conferences, and is really in the spotlight. She was on many of the biggest American news channels this past week, and but here in Sweden it just gets a small, dutiful mention on Aftonbladet, TV4, and so on. But no debate. Once again,
And what the whistleblowers in the United States are saying are truly incredible and astonishing things that are difficult to believe.
Yes, that we have recovered craft and beings, or biologics as they call them, that is, biological traces from something that we can't trace back to earthly taxonomy or our biological life forms.
And these leaks, they come from people who have worked high up within military security agencies in the US, right?
Extremely high up. I mean, David Grush, who is perhaps the most well-known whistleblower, who testified in July 2023. He was in a position where he compiled the president's daily brief from, I believe, the NRO and the NGA. That is, the satellite agencies that collect satellite data. So this is at the highest possible level.
If we go back to SVT, what happens there?
Yeah, well, as I said, I refused to leave, and eventually the police are called, and I'm taken to the psych ward again. And this time I don't manage to talk my way out of there in 26 hours. Instead, it takes 6 weeks. So it was 6 weeks of compulsory care. They restrained me and gave me shots and things when I came in because I kind of lost it after this whole period. So the only time I've been a little agitated or almost aggressive was when I got to the psych ward. I went up to a sofa and pushed it into the wall, and then I was restrained and forcibly injected.
I can imagine that almost anyone would get a sense of unreality and rebel in that kind of context.
Yeah, it's completely insane. For my opinions, I'm basically locked up because as soon as that anger subsided, I was calm and fine again.
And that's
how I am most of the time. Always, like 99.9% of the time. You can ask my fiance or anyone. I'm not the type to fly off the handle or be aggressive at all.
right. And this care you received, you mentioned you were restrained, forcibly injected.
Yeah, and I could barely speak for 3 days after that. I don't know what they gave me, but I was completely knocked out. And then when I started the process of appealing, of course, to the administrative court.
Did you have a lawyer?
Yes, I was there 3 times, I think.
Yeah.
2 or 3 times, and I had different lawyers each time, but my appeal was denied. So, yeah, I was there for 6 weeks, and the day before I was discharged, the doctor even suggested electroshock therapy. And this doctor, he was very focused on the ufology aspect at first.
Okay.
Saying that, well, you can believe what you want, but basically what you believe in, Christian, is just childish notions and nonsense. But then I think when he noticed that I stood my ground and that I could conduct myself and speak for myself, I think that whole angle was toned down.
Okay.
And then it became more about mania and bipolar disorder and a bunch of diagnoses instead.
Do you have a diagnosis?
No.
Have you ever received any psychiatric care before at any time? Even once?
Yeah, but that's actually been related to some other things, but it's...
But not because of a diagnosis, and you didn't receive a diagnosis during that care either?
Well, I mean, diagnoses like I have delusions because I'm involved in these things, it's on that level, but it's not a diagnosis like I'm a confirmed bipolar or something like that, or anything in that direction. It's related to the same things.
Had that kind of contact with the healthcare system before?
Yes, there was one time before.
And when was that?
What would that be? I think it was 3 years ago.
Okay. Was it about the same subject then?
Almost. It had a bit more to do with the spiritual side of things.
Okay.
but it is related according to many people connect ufology with the spiritual. But that would be a very long story if we were to.
Let's not get into that as well. But what I'm thinking is this. What I'm trying to get at is that you're an honest person.
Yes, definitely.
Right?
You really are.
You're open about what you think and feel.
Yep.
And both what we commonly refer to as spiritual matters and also what we've touched on here today, things like unknown phenomena, mysterious occurrences, secret information, and other things of that nature. These are all topics where, when you metaphorically lift the lid and actually voice them aloud among people who are more conventionally minded, or who tend to think in more traditional ways, their surroundings and the people around them often react with what is commonly called cognitive dissonance, which is a kind of mental discomfort or tension that arises when confronted with ideas that challenge their established beliefs. They think that if this is true, or if there's any truth to it, it destabilizes my inner sense of security and my internal structures too much. That now I have to react with psychological violence against this person. Do you agree?
Absolutely, and that's a bit of what I've been through myself when I had contact for the first time 3 years ago. It was exactly that. I went through, or I managed to push myself out of that cognitive dissonance, I would say. And that was incredibly tough. So I've gone through that myself.
But your surroundings, if we go back to your surroundings.
Yes.
Do you think it could be like that, or was it actually the case for you that when you expressed this to your surroundings, they told you that you were crazy and so on, or?
Yes, I mean, I've heard that. Absolutely, and it's what the healthcare system's message to me is like that. It becomes like that.
But I'm also thinking of other people.
Yes, but absolutely.
If it's colleagues or if it's relatives and things like that, I mean, it always comes up when you express unconventional things. There will always be someone who smirks a little or says something derogatory.
Yeah, something like that. But at the same time, I have a very large network of contacts. I'm a disc jockey and active in party planning and know a lot of people, so I'm used to a lot of people having some sort of superficial idea of who I am or what I do, and I don't attach much importance to that. Instead, I've done my projects and succeeded with much of what I've done, and I have a lot of self-confidence.
I don't know.
I don't care that much about what people say, but rather, from my closest relatives, I haven't heard anything. It's more like casual acquaintances who form their own picture of what happened without actually talking to me or knowing much about it at all.
What I'm trying to get at is that it can almost get to the point where you seek medical care because of reactions, or because your thoughts deviate so much from the norm that you eventually think, well, maybe I do need some medical help now.
Yes, that's why I went on my own at first.
Exactly.
But there wasn't much care to be had here in Sweden then, I feel. So it gets really weird when I'm locked up like that without us even talking about it.
It's almost like a punishment for being open and honest. Because as you said, you've been peaceful, unaffected, and to give compulsory care in a situation like that, it almost comes back to your honesty.
Yes. So it becomes very strange. That's what I mean when I say that. I think many people maybe don't really, if you haven't been through something similar, it's probably hard to imagine that this is how it works.
Truly.
Because it is, yes, it's shocking. So I don't know who, I mean, it took many months after this longer stay before I was back to my old self again, because it felt like an incredible violation to walk around in there within those four walls. And on top of that, in an emergency ward where people came and went screaming and banging on the walls. And it was very intense, for 6 weeks with nothing to do. And I had no idea how long I would have to stay there. Instead, it felt like things weren't moving forward a lot of the time either. It was as if I had no prognosis for when I would get out. It was just unclear the whole time until I was discharged. I had no idea what was going to happen or anything.
No, an incredible pressure, really.
Yes, absolutely.
When you're subjected to that kind of pressure, being punished for your honesty, for your most intimate thoughts, being punished for your opinions, and your whole future becomes uncertain, you feel branded and judged. You're isolated from those you love, and so on. Isn't that when a truly psychotic person would go totally crazy?
Yes, that's what I think too. That much of what they claim about how I supposedly was, or that I supposedly suffered from bipolarity or mania and so on, that much of it comes from how I'm being treated in that case, I assume. Yes.
Or I would rather say that you would have become much, much worse if you had a real psychotic illness. Without being a doctor, just as a layman, I intuitively think that your behavior should have gotten much, much worse from this treatment if you had a genuine psychotic illness.
Yes. Whereas I myself stayed calm, continued writing my book, and joked with the staff, and, became a character there. I'd guess that in the end, many of the staff were probably wondering what on earth I was doing there.
You mentioned to me, and you didn't say it to brag, but because I was asking you a bit before the interview if you feel you're cognitively different or if you're neurotypical, or have ever been close to such a diagnosis, but the only thing you said then was that you have very high intelligence.
Yes. Well, considering I've done tests and so on, and yes, went through school with high grades in all subjects and have always found such things very easy, I think it would be dishonest to claim otherwise.
I know you're modest and don't want to brag, but would you be willing to share your IQ score?
No, I think we can skip that for now.
Yes, it's enough that I know, because the reason I want to pinpoint this is because I have a line of reasoning here. When you're that honest and have a strong sense of justice like you do, and you gather so much information and make so many observations, don't you eventually end up saying things that are very alien to the general public, to the average person, so to speak?
Yes, that's how it is. And that, yes. That, yes, absolutely. And yes, because I mean, something you realize when you learn a lot about a specific subject is how incredibly little you actually know.
I understand.
There are so many people who are experts on things just within this field that I have no idea about. And they demonstrably show me on a weekly basis that they have an incredible grasp of it and I know nothing. And it's like that with everything. You can get to truly become an expert on something in today's world is a real effort, and there's an incredible amount of information to sift through, an incredible amount of false information in most subjects. We humans are experts at spreading disinformation and misinformation completely unconsciously. So building up information gradually from many different sources and carefully filtering out anything that doesn't quite fit with the rest of the information is an important process. It requires enormous amounts of information and an incredible amount of time. But it has gotten easier with AI. With a little help, you can connect things a bit faster nowadays.
I agree with you. If we're going to wrap this up and bring our discussion to a close, I'd like to give you the floor for this, to talk about what is so urgent and pressing right now about opening up, especially when it comes to classified information.
Well, because it's something that affects us. Just a month or so ago, the airports closed down, Kastrup and Gardermoen near us here, and we had so-called drone alerts all over the Nordic region, and that has continued across Europe, and it's actually been going on globally for a year now, and there's so much good information indicating that these so-called drones exhibit technology that we in the rest of the Western world have nothing comparable to, you see. It's on a completely different level. They evade radar detection, they don't give off any IR, meaning no heat signature. They appear out of nowhere, they leave without anyone being able to track where they've gone, and our NATO drone defense systems don't work on them. It's something else entirely. And we have members of Congress in the US who are briefed on the subject, who claim there are bases in the Earth's oceans. And so this is incredibly urgent. And then from a purely philosophical perspective, I mean, we as humanity, we've built Berlin walls and Korean borders to shut out other knowledge. Imagine then what knowledge we could gain from the outside about what we're doing on Earth and how bad we might be at managing our societies. There might be a ton of information out there that our leaders think we shouldn't even consider, that we should just stick to the societal structures we have right now. And then you have, just the fact that the Pentagon alone has squandered who knows how many billions of taxpayer money, and Sweden now with our cooperation. Sweden is basically right under the US now. We're like on our way to becoming a state almost. We're incredibly tight, and the American military can do whatever it wants
on our soil. If we can pause on that for a moment, because I'm not even sure everyone knows this, but with our NATO membership, the American military now has the right to have bases with unknown activities on Swedish territory. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, and we can't prosecute American military personnel here either. So it might not be an advantage per se to go through an American court-martial if something were to happen, but it becomes democratically strange. Because, we have a topic here that isn't handled democratically at all. It's not on the political agenda. For the past few months, I've tried to push it through in the party I'm a member of. But you're met with suicide baiting. You're called a tinfoil hat, you're schizo, you're an idiot, basically. It's just not there, you can't bring it up. Because the general public here is so convinced that this isn't something that's real. Despite the fact that we have phenomena that shut down our airports in our neighboring countries just a few months ago. And it's ongoing, so this is becoming more and more relevant. And yes, considering what's happening in other countries, I think that in their decision-making assemblies, I think it's high time we raise the issue here. And the interest is enormous. There are a few documentaries have been made in recent years, and people follow, for example, Agneta Jodin is the best example of a celebrity who's into this.
Yes.
She's well-versed and has 2 different podcasts.
Mm.
So the subject exists and is real for so many people who have experienced things, even if you go there. It's enough just to see what's happening at the highest levels in other countries, and that we need to have a debate about this. It feels so strange that we don't.
And undemocratic.
Yes.
But one last question here. Is there anything to suggest that something else is involved other than the super-rich elite? The big investment firms, the super-rich families, and their collaboration with military intelligence services, large corporations and states? Is there anything to suggest it's something other than them? Something from another world than ours?
If you look at these best cases that I mentioned initially, the Ariel School in Zimbabwe outside the city of Rua in 94, or the Varginha case in Brazil in 96. Then we have countless testimonies where people have encountered completely alien life forms. So I think those 2 cases stand out and are well worth looking into. There's something there. Then I absolutely believe that most observations, and that a lot of other things with a human origin could be at play. For example, AI experiments within the military that might be very far ahead of their time, or military technology, of course. But there are a few cases that are so good where I at least have to conclude that it's alien life forms visiting us.
I thank you for letting me interview you. I think this was a fantastic example of being stonewalled by the democratic state.
Thanks for having me.